Alright, I'm alive. Hello. This is Levi Costello. I'm doing another app, the Finall app review. Sadly, again, this is going to be one of those that will not work and complete due to an issue that has not been able to be completed by Dr. Grissom, Blake, some other friends, and the solution that was found for one person was not found for another. To show you my error, so basically everything works except for we have a weird error called data.feed evaluation and the object that is not found. And through looking through the code seems to be all right. I have copied and pasted code from the original video to the other one, as you can see. As you can see here, I have completed all of the social media videos, and I went throughout each one and just completed it and copied over. But apparently, it's not going to work for that. The second thing that I was going through was the IP client for setting up the server because it's set up for localhost. Try the home default, my home IP address, the default gateway, and the current IP at the CS lab. And I tried the localhost, and those did not work, and I still retain the same error. So, despite that, I will press on, and I will explain the video as shown through the GitHub examples right here, as I've done in previous videos. So I can get this all nice and centered. As you can see, each side, we will be able to put threads and post messages on this app, and allow the people to be allow the user to be able to add different things and to make comments on each individual one. As you see, you can make individual comments, and you can make a comment on that comment, and you can post your own post, and you can also like statuses on both screens, and they'll all update and refresh. The good thing about this is that this is all made through the through Apollo GraphQL, and the Apollo server is basically its own JSON screen. It's not necessarily like a database or anything. We're just storing it on a web page, and this web page is updated, and we'll be able to through creating GraphQL strings. GraphQL data strings, and these data strings will input information back and forth to the server through the actual app and the JSON file itself. And I'll explain how. And basically, it's pretty straightforward how this app works together. But I'm gonna just explain and go through it as we go as is. So I already have some files set up over here. We have the mobile, and then we also have the server. Why is that? And we have the server down here. There it is. The key things to take from the server is that we have the resolvers.js and the type.js. The db.json and the dbs file, these are the information that's taken directly from the file itself, and just basic information to provide, so that way the different feeds, the users will be able to be distinguished between the between who is using the app. Then the resolvers.js and the type.js are the information that we need to be able to access the Apollo. Now, the Apollo server takes in clients, mutations, and resolvers. The queries, resolvers, and mutations. The queries are basically, here, I'll just show it right here. We got queries, mutations, and the resolvers are what resolves queries. The queries are basically taking information right here, each one having its own ID, like feed, for example, which is the different messages or pictures, or whatever you want to send on social media. Each of those takes in ID, user ID, status, publish at, parent status ID, user is linked, and each one has its own variable of what it is and what is needed to be implemented. And then we'll basically put it in this. We will type out the code here, and then we'll see how it is functioned and received. Now the queries set it up, but the resolvers is what is actually needed to make sure that the section is actually transcribing and being loaded into the app itself, on the server to the app. And right here, the type devs, we have more of the queries, the queries right here, which takes in the different things. Now all this is mainly copied, and it's copied through the status.js. Where's status? Somewhere around here. search it real quick. Oh, there we go. Now, some of the information we can see, like from here, like we take in the different statuses of what is need to be put in and what we need for each section. So what we want to present on the screen is also going to be presented through the feed, so that way we can load it and actually set it up. So now with the resolvers, we're basically going through each section and we're making sure that the section is resolved and gain the correct representation. We'll be able to give it the variables that we want, the IDs that we want, and to take in certain functions. So basically for each function, like for example, feed status for the query, or for the user, the string, avatar URI name, here's name, we'll decide which one it takes and put it in. And honestly, it's just straightforward. We're just going through each one, the responses, the queries here, and that's basically all this resolvers for the server side. Then we go in to queries.js and mutations, and then client.js. These three are for what actually take in information from the JSON file that we have made. The client sets up the address for where it is going to be hosted, and then allows us to give us an authorization bearer, so that way we are authenticated to be using this based on our authorization. If our user is not authorized, it will not be implemented. But then again, this isn't fully implemented, so that will be something that we can do in the update. And then the queries and mutations, it's basically the same thing from the server side. The queries takes in, shows the different sections. We have request feed, request response, and each one has different variables. And then the mutations are, but the mutations are a bit different because they are the similar thing, but they mainly resolve it in a different way, that actually sets it up into string interpolation. So like right example here, we have a mutation right here that takes it, that shows the information in different variables based on what we are requiring or what we are getting. And this takes in the different queries that we have stated earlier. Yeah. Now, going into the bread and butter of the app and what makes it go, we have the screens, the feeds, new status, and the thread status. Most of this is already created for us, but the main thing that we were able to do was make it so that way the data is actually loaded into the file. So while it displays and navigates through the different files and screens, we have the console log.load, and if loading is returned null, then it takes in the data.feed, which is from the queries that we have been able to access right here in like the request feed. We're also taking in the data, loading in, importing the request feed from the GraphQL series and the like, and different mutations. The mutation for the like status to be able to like a button. Threads are similar. We're taking a request response, like status, and we're also loading in the data, setting up the variables, and then loading in the data.response. And then for the new status, we're doing the same thing. And this one is for creating this one is a bit more complicated because we're making on a right button press, which basically sets it up because you can either add in the data that is already shown to display, or you can set it up to take in information from the JSON file to import stuff based on different actions that you take. And that's basically the app. It's pretty straightforward. It's really creative. I'm enjoying this one. But sadly, none of my server stuff has worked so far since I've worked on it. Until I can fix that up, I will not be using that on my final app or project. But we shall see what happens. Thanks so much.